Thank you. You're welcome to this session. I'm glad we are right on time. This is our session on feminisms on the web. And we have chosen this topic because I'm sure you've met someone on the web. You're here with us because you're on the web. And we will try to dive in with very many exciting panelists ahead with us, who will dive us into different contexts in different countries so that we can see those threads that connect all of us, both on and offline. So before we do that, I would like to invite, and I didn't even introduce myself. My name is Rosebel Kagumire. I am moderating this session. I am the editor for African Feminism, which is a website where we document stories of African women and minorities and kind of bring narratives that are not necessarily mainstream. And I'm here with other panelists, but before we dive into this topic, I would like to invite tonight's performance all the way from Brazil. Nara Kotu is going to give us a 5 minutes performance, but before then she will introduce herself and then dive into the performance. You're welcome, Nara.
Hi, can I speak in Portuguese? That's okay?
Yes, of course.
Meu nome é Nara Couto, eu sou cantora baiana, tenho 20 anos de carreira aqui no Brasil. Estou acompanhada de Marcelo Galter, pianista, baiano também. Eu gostaria de apresentar um pequeno repertório que fala um pouco sobre a ancestralidade, a partir da minha visão, por ser uma mulher de Iemanjá, ou de Iemonjá. E depois a gente vai trazendo outras visões dessa ancestralidade até falar sobre a autoestima da mulher negra com a canção Linda e Preta. Então eu vou começar. Minha jangada saiu, pescador já se rezou, Iemonjá abençoou sua saída ao alto mar. O horizonte se abriu, aquele brilho encantador, pescador se arrepiou com um pedido de Odoiá. Minha jangada saiu, pescador já se rezou, Iemonjá abençoou sua saída ao alto mar. O horizonte se abriu, aquele brilho encantador, pescador se arrepiou com o pedido de Odoiá. O brilho do mar me chamou e pediu a minha mão e disse que eu teria meu gosto. O brilho do mar me chamou e pediu a minha mão e disse que eu teria o que eu quisesse. Era só abrir meu coração. Canoas e jangadas, atirando rede ao mar, mistérios e segredos abissais, guardados lá no fundo dos corais, segredos que ninguém vai desvendar, guardados pela rainha do mar. O brilho do mar me chamou e pediu e disse que eu teria o que eu quisesse. Era só abrir meu coração. O brilho do mar me chamou e pediu a minha mão e disse que eu teria o que eu quisesse. Era só abrir meu coração. Essa gente sofrida, unida, alegria traz. Esse povo cansado, pisado, esperança traz. Essa dança que dança nos dá força viva para alentar a mensagem que eu trago em meu ser, toda a gana que eu tenho em viver. Minha dança de negro, quero ver meu pé sangrar. Quebro meu cativeiro com canto que é milenar. Canto um canto de adoração. Canto um canto de meditação. Canto um canto de libertação. Canto um canto das massas, eu sei. Oh, eu sou Ilê do Malê. Oh, eu sou Ilê do Malê. Ilê do Malê, filha de rei. Cante, dance, meu povo, que o mundo está pra mudar. A mudança é preciso, é tempo do rei reinar. Cante com o peito e o coração. Cante, faça cantar multidão. Cante, dance, seja onde for. Cante, faça como fez o amor. Minha dança é de negro. Quero ver meu pé sangrar. Quebro meu cativeiro com canto que é milenar. Canto um canto de adoração. Canto um canto de meditação. Canto um canto de libertação. Canto um canto das massas, eu sei. Oh, eu sou Ilê do Malê. Oh, eu sou Ilê do Malê. Ilê do Malê, filha de rei. Saravá, 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 Yorubá, Beni, Gana, Saravá, Saravá, yeah. Saravá, 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 Yorubá, Beni, Gana, Saravá, Saravá, yeah. Saravá, 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 Yorubá, Beni, Gana.
Thank you so
Agora
much.
eu vou cantar uma canção. Welcome.
Can you tell us a little about the song?
What? Can you
tell us a little bit about the song?
I can understand. This song is the composer, her name is Mateus Aleluia from Chicões, and the next song is her name is Beautiful and Black. Oh, Black and Beautiful.
Thank you so much. It's been great having you here, Nara. We hope to see you in the near future in our next festival.
Well, can you sing more one song? Have time?
Okay, just really quick, and you can speak in Portuguese because I have translation.
Ok. Essa canção fala sobre a beleza da mulher negra. E quando eu comecei a cantá-la, foi um momento que eu entendi o quanto eu era bonita, pois eu cresci enxergando como muitas mulheres negras sempre somos vistas com uma sensualidade e sexualidade. Mas, a partir dessa canção, eu pude entender o quanto eu era bonita, meus olhos, minha boca, meu nariz. Então, vou cantar um trechinho dessa canção, Linda e Preta. Linda e preta, na cor da noite da Bahia, preta, o dia te anuncia, linda e preta, você virá. Linda e preta, eclipse da rua, linda e preta, esconde sol e lua, linda e preta, você virá. Que nem a cor do céu de manhã cedo acorda o mar. Meu mundo começa só depois que te encontrar. Seu cabelo black dá um quirk em meu olhar. Canta essa canção só pra dizer que você é linda e preta. Linda e preta. Linda e preta, você virá. Linda e preta, diz que nem desconfia. Linda e preta, a conta que te guia. Linda e preta, conta quem é teu orixá. Você virá. Conta quem é teu orixá. Você virá. Conta quem é teu orixá. Thank you so much. Obrigada. Olorumo do pé. Que Ori abençoe a gente, que Ori seja sempre nosso guia, que Ori sempre se harmonize com os nossos propósitos. Desejo isso para mim, assim como eu desejo para vocês. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was really beautiful. And I want to thank Gabriela, who was able to connect us with Nara and be able to communicate and be able to bring her in this session. Thanks so much. Have a nice day. Back to the session. I'll be running this session with Nancy Kachingwe, who is going to be our great timekeeper, reminding us of what we need to be paying attention to. And we have a Q&A box. Please use it and contribute, ask us questions. We'll be here. And really contribute respectfully. We have translation in Spanish, Portuguese, and French. So I hope everybody's taken care of, kind of. Thank you. Welcome to this session. This session is about the internet as a space for action, for reflection, mobilization, and the relationship between feminism in the digital world, in the internet, which is very old, as old as technology, So I want to introduce the panel that is going to dive into this topic with me. And on the panel, we have Henda from Tunisia, who is a feminist activist who has taken part in different political movements in Tunisia. and led campaigns on freedom of expression and social justice. She will be talking more about herself shortly. Also from Ghana, I have also from Ghana, I have Wonpin. I hope I'm saying this right, but feel free to correct me because, you know, Dr. Mohammed Wonpini, who is from Ghana. She's a feminist activist and scholar. She's also an assistant professor at the Global Media Industries at the University, assistant professor of Global Media Industries at the University of Georgia. I'm glad that you could join us this early. From Cote d'Ivoire, we have Edwige Dro. She's a writer, a literary translator, and an activist. She'll be also talking more about herself. Last but not least, Lina. Lina, mi perdone, mi español es muy poco. So I don't know how to say your last name, and you'll teach me. So Lina is the director and co-founder of Sentido. She holds a PhD in history and a BA in literature. She publishes regularly on gender and sexuality in social movements. Another panelist who will be joining us a little later, yeah, she had a family thing to take care of. Yostena Matke from Nepal will be joining us. So I'm going to invite panelists for this session to really share, introduce yourselves a little more and tell us how this session really relates to your work. And I'll just go by looking at the at my screen. Lina, please go first. You're welcome.
Thank you, Rosabel. I am really, really happy to be here today. I'm very honored to be invited to this panel. My name is Lina Cuellar. I know it's not easy to pronounce my, my surname. I am the co-founder of Sentido. This is Sentido, which in Spanish, which translates sense or feeling also. So our organization focuses on gender and sexual diversity, social movements mainly, and human rights. But we mainly work based on human rights and gender and sexual diversity. So we have website which is sentido.com, and we regularly publish doing rigorous journalism on these topics. We also do research with other bigger organizations, and we do consulting with companies and other civil society organizations.
Thank you so much, Lina. Next, Henda, please. You're welcome to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation, Rose. I'm very happy to be here with you today. So I'm from Tunisia, from Tunis. And as you said, yeah, I'm a feminist and activist. And I have to say that for me, feminism is very related to internet. I discovered feminism through internet and the blogs. And that's how I started to be interested to feminism, and I started to write about feminism. Of course, you know that in Tunisia, we had a revolution 10 years ago. This year we celebrate the 10th year of the revolution. And through all these years, feminism is growing in Tunisia. With the freedom of speech and also with this young generation of feminists. So I would be very happy to talk about it later with you.
You're welcome, Henda. Thank you. Next, Dr. Mohammed. You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Rosabel. I'm very happy to be here today. So as you said rightly, I'm an assistant professor of media here at the University of Georgia. I am from Tamale, Ghana, and I was very happy to be invited to this panel because it sort of intersects with my research, which examines the way that African women have used digital spaces to organize or to get justice for various issues, and also how we have used digital media or social media, new media, to sort of bring awareness to various issues affecting people across various communities on the continent. So I'm really excited to talk about this and how it intersects with my research. And thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Next, we have Edwig from Côte d'Ivoire. You're welcome, Edwig.
Yeah, I was muted. Thank you so much, Rosebell. Thank you to everybody. It is a privilege, for me to be here. It is a privilege because where would I meet these, wonderful women that I am spending the afternoon with today? I say that because, I am the founder of a library in Abidjan that is called 1949, and 1949 is a library of women's writing from Africa and the Black world. And of course, it is a physical space here in Abidjan, and I will get to talk about that later on. But for me, being online, it is about connection. So, like this session today, and with all my other work, it is about connection within, within Africa, with the Black world, to to find synergies and to work together. So I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. And we are going to be joined by Yotsna, who's from Nepal, at a later time. I hope she can make it. Let's dive in. So I'm going to just really facilitate this conversation. I wanted to reach out to look at the fact that feminism and the internet have had a long relationship, and feminists with the internet has been here for a long time. But around the mid-90s, around early 90s, we see terms like cyber feminism emerging, trying to define a set of political communication strategies that were oriented towards electronic culture and using the internet and digital technologies. So, and from that on, we have seen indeed how different feminist movements have interacted with the internet. In a few times, it has been really like suspicious, like any new technology, like what is this? Because also, like any technology, it has always kind of mimicked the inequalities we have in society, the dominations we have in society. So some movements have always looked at the internet initially as something like, be careful with it. Yeah, and while others were more optimistic, at least along the way, to say, yeah, we need to address this area that is really highly masculinized up to now. If you look at certain countries across the globe, you might find like the digital divide is real in terms of gender, and not only just gender in numbers, but actually in terms of what happens on the internet, from how women how much women's knowledge is online, how women are quoted online, who accesses the online spaces, and all these things. So I wanted to do that introduction to say that, we've seen different relationships with technology in the internet in particular. I wanted to ask then how our panelists, what has been your own relationship with the internet, and can you reflect at least on that journey in your specific location or in the region you're coming from? We know in some places, the uptake of technology among women and minorities has been slow because of the systemic structural issues that also exist. So I would like to hear more that conversation of like what has been your relationship with technology. And Edwin, since you were the last one, let me start.
I was hoping to hear all the others. I wouldn't say, internet for me, it is very important. Yes, I think when I do not have internet, I kind of go crazy. I use internet for everything. It is part of my work because I work with different people around the place. So for me personally, it is important. And in my work, it is also important. I wouldn't go as far as to say, let's be careful with the internet. It is a technology to be used, but in a usage of it, we need to take into account the people who cannot be on the internet, who do not know the places to go, to manipulate this wonderful tool. With the library, with 1949, the reason why it was important for me to have a physical location, and a location that is not in your typical middle class, area of Abidjan. It was because I felt like at sometime when we speak of feminisms, but when we speak of literature or anything, there is a population that we forget. So the way that I use internet there, the way that I use a space there, it is, if I did not have that physical space, it would be very difficult. So we shouldn't forget the other part of the population that cannot use internet, that do not know how to use internet. And in our part of the world, at least in Abidjan, internet is very expensive, as it is in Lomé and other places.
Thank you, Edwy. That is insightful. Personally, let me remind you also and remind myself that we need to slow down for translation. I kind of speak so fast sometimes. So personally, in my journey, I remember the early 2000s being online in Uganda and that working as a journalist, and very few journalists were online. In fact, people wondered, what are you obsessed with? What do you look for online? Online spaces were seen as something you go. It was like for dating site. That was the only thing people thought about the internet. And I remember being among the really few first people in Uganda to have a blog, and later on among the first women to have a blog and have a voice and speak to the daily observations. Especially, I was a journalist, and there was a lot I was seeing in the field that could not be accommodated in the kind of media formats that are around. So I found like blogs were some place where I could put my my thoughts and my critic, and many times I was wrong, of course, on some of those things, and it's nice to look back and say like, oh, this is how I thought in 2010, 2001. It's interesting to see that, but I also saw like how the internet then has grown in the country from that time, and it's exciting to see more women trying to also go here and be vocal about the different things they see every day and about their life. So, Lina, can you run an independent media house? What has been your journey and why did you arrive at that? And it's very internet based.
Thank you, Rosebel. Well, first, I think I forgot to mention that I am in Bogota, Colombia. Colombia is a country in South America. We started Sentido in 2011 as a blog. Also, as you have mentioned, we started blogging about sexual and gender diversity. I say we because I'm mentioning also Maria, who is not here, but she also co-founded Sentido. And we started talking about LGBTQ issues, just like, writing. We started writing and we noticed that people were saying, oh, that's cool, this is interesting, because we noticed that the traditional media back in 2011 were not talking about those topics in the way we wished, or at least talking about those topics. So when we started talking about everyday issues that we face, for example, questions we get when, for example, say I'm a lesbian, and people say, oh, cool, so we can do a threesome, or we can, like all these ideas that people have about sex and LGBTQ people and being out of the closet and everything. So we started talking about it, and people responded in a positive way. So in 2012, we switched from a blog to a website called Sentido. Um, and Maria is a journalist. I'm not a journalist. I studied literature and I am a historian. So we started to combine journalism with academic knowledge and trying to find out how to reach out to people in a way that we could provide knowledge, we could provide rigorous journalism, we could show how to use in a correct way images, for example, images of LGBTQ people. Normally the media use the same image of LGBTQ people on a demonstration or the LGBT in the pride. So we said there are other ways of being LGBTQ. So our relationship with internet has been like a love story. It's not easy because we are all women, and Colombia is a sexist, Catholic, traditional country where even gay men have more privileges, than lesbians. So they have more voices, more spaces, and it was not easy to be online, as women, lesbian, talking about LGBTQ topics on the web.
Thank you so much, Lena. That's really insightful. And to understand that the struggles are connected, because we have many also in the region, many LGBTQ outlets that are trying to put the narrative and humanize and get out of this stereotypical coverage that you see in the mainstream media back here also. So I wanted to bring in Wompeni apart from just to build on this, because I know you have studied this. I've seen you study from Ghana. If you can just discuss with us your own journey, but then bring us to this kind of studies that are available for people to dive in.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Rosebell. So with my journey, I have an interesting relationship with the internet because I come from a marginalized position as far as class is concerned. And so I didn't have access to a laptop until, much later during my undergrad, in my final year of undergrad, when I somehow, managed to purchase one on my own. And so I have a very interesting relationship with the internet. And so whenever I think about the internet and digital activism and feminisms, I think about the issues of inequality and how that sort of is reproduced in these spaces. But I also see the value of these digital spaces because to some extent, the internet sort of democratized the public sphere in Ghana. So topics that would otherwise not be discussed publicly, or that were discussed publicly but were not made publicly available to a large number of people, we didn't see them before, but we've seen them recently to the point where you'll see that the internet is setting the agenda for news stations, and I'll also say that it also brings attention to the way that women were historically marginalized in traditional media in Ghana. Whenever we had like panelists talking about various issues from politics, even to gender, health and education and the environment, it was always males. And we still have that issue right now, but I'll say that more and more women, the visibility of more and more women on these panels, on traditional media, TV, radio, means that, the reason why we have that is because of the kind of visibility some of these people have on digital media platforms and on social media platforms. So it won't be surprising to find that a lot of panels that are put together in many Ghanaian media organizations are people that were recruited from social media platforms, right? But that also brings to question what voices are not on these platforms and what voices are excluded from the conversation. And another thing I want to mention is the histories around around the web, the internet, cyberspaces, where when the internet started, when people started adopting the internet, or it started becoming common in Ghana, and I believe in other African communities, the conversation that was constantly had was the novelty effect. You know, people were talking about how new it was and whether it was a bad influence on people. The internet, is it good or bad? There were very, very reductionist conversations that we had about the internet. It's good to know that we have evolved past that and we've moved beyond those conversations. But a lot of the time, you know, they would, whenever you heard anything about the internet, it's like, is the internet making your child dumb? Is the internet ruining your relationship? Those are the things that we saw during those times. And it was really, it's interesting and refreshing to see that we have moved past that, even though not absolutely. And I'm really looking forward to learning from others about this topic further as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I would like to bring in Hinda. It's very important. You know, she just highlighted the fact that it's 10 years since the Tunisian revolution. It doesn't feel like it's been so long, you know? It's amazing. And I wanted her to share her journey, but also capture for us that moment. What does it feel like after ushering in that revolution, which was very much social media and the internet was at the heart of young evolution.
Yeah, actually, very related. Internet, social media, and the evolution are very related. I want to describe a bit what was the Tunisia before the revolution. Of course, it was a dictatorship, and as a young woman, me or other people in Tunisia, internet was very important to discover what is happening in the world and to read also about Tunisia. In fact, even the dictatorship censored many websites, but we managed to access to these websites and to read about what is happening in Tunisia and in jails and about social movements in South, and also about the situation of women, of children, and many other important topics. And that's how I was very fascinated by internet and using internet. So it was a censorship, and we start to use internet, and with this tool, a very important tool, we created like a community to demand, to have demands and to ask for freedom, to ask for free access to internet and to stop the censorship. And that's why we started this revolution. Now, the situation is very different. If we talk, for example, about women, I remember when before social media, we had many blogs, very interesting blogs or forums where we discuss political issues and women issues, and we write about our lives, our experiences. This is very interesting, I mean. And then in 2007, we started to use Facebook, and also it was nice. It was really nice, consistent with videos, some photos, and a lot of text, a lot of articles. And when the revolution came in 2011, little by little, people started to use more social media, and we noticed that social media is really changing because also political tool, political parties started to use Facebook and to put money on Facebook, and then to manipulate also the opinion, the public opinion. And now, as feminists, for example, we are talking more about safety on internet, how women can express themselves without being aggressed and without facing violence. This is the main topic now. So the situation, when we talk about is internet is good or not, for feminism, or for us as individuals, as women, or as LGBTQI people, we mainly talk about safety, how to raise awareness about minorities, about women's rights, and to prevent this violence, which is becoming very common, and every day there is more and more violence on social media. I don't know if I can continue, because there is also a lot of things we are doing now. We start doing these things since 3 or 4 years to prevent this violence, or it will be for the next question.
Thank you so much. That was interesting to see the kind of chronology and where you've come from and where you're at. And we'll come back for you to share with us really what the situation is right now. I wanted to actually, I had a thoughts when everybody was talking. For example, when Pini reminded me of my first phone, I was given, it was my uncle, and I was just like fresh from university. Of course, I wouldn't have afforded a phone. So like when you talk about inequalities and how you got online, I also like could only get online because I had access to a newsroom at a very young age. By the age of like 20, I was already in the newsroom being an intern, and that gave me access to a few computers that were there and could explore different ideas, and that's how, you know, I picked that interest. So, you know, definitely. So just looking at how have technologies then, internet, how has the internet transformed gender? Has the domination and control that we see, we witness every day in our lives, has it expanded within the realm of the cyberspace? And what has been like experiences from your context? I would like to hear from you, Lina.
Thank you, Rosabel. Well, I think that internet has definitely changed the way we perceive gender, and we perceive ourselves as women and non-binary people, because I think in first place, for example, in Colombia, a study in 2018 showed that women use internet mainly like 77% for information on health. And I think that is crucial, because before that, a lot of women didn't know how to face, health issues, or if something they were experiencing was normal or not. And I think health includes also, for example, abortion, which in Colombia is legal in 3 cases. But for example, during the quarantine, between March and September, there were organizations that were talking about how to get the pills, the pills, if they wanted to see, if a woman wanted to have an abortion at their home. And they were having, how do you say, help from like very serious organizations saying we can guide you on the process, because a lot of women were having trouble with this. So that was a huge, conversation, and people saying that the organizations were promoting abortion and everyone wanted to get an abortion. But this is about health and sex and reproductive rights for women, and that was thanks to internet that this conversation, got a very important place during the quarantine this year. So I think that internet has helped a lot of people. Of course, in the case of having access to internet, for example, after South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America are the countries with the biggest internet access gaps for women. So still, we need to work on that. But I think that, for example, talking about LGBTQ issues, a lot of people in the rural areas in Colombia are getting more information and are having the chance to talk about how they live their sexual and gender diversity identities in areas that are not, covered by the state, or face, for example, the internal conflict, which I didn't mention, but Colombia has had an internal conflict since 1945. So so there are a lot of issues, that get mixed, taking into account what we are talking about gender.
Thank you so much. Building on that, I would like to bring in Wilpini to reflect on, for example, issues like, has the internet brought in new forms of liberation, or are we seeing a kind of continued, other structures like neocolonialism? Just looking at that gender and its interaction with other issues like class, race, and age, but really that nexus, because we exist, we are looking at gender, but also how this interacts with other forms of existing oppressions. How has that played out, Wonbin?
Yes, so before I even go on to answer the question, I just want to provide some background on conversations around the internet and its relationship with society. So a lot of the times in neoliberalist circles, when conversations are had about the internet, people make it seem like the mere existence of the internet means there is going to be some sort of transformation, or the mere access to the internet, means that there is going to be some sort of change. But I want us to pay attention to the idea that Andre Brock, who is a professor at Georgia Tech University, talks about, which is called critical technocultural discourse analysis, which is an analytical tool to understand the way the internet works. So within that framework, we have to understand that the internet, there is no binary between the internet and the real or the physical world. And I'm saying this because a lot of the critiques of digital activism have been that go into the real world and do something real rather than, excuse me, sit on the internet and do that, right? So what we see manifesting online or in digital spaces are merely just what happens in the real world. There are real people behind the accounts making those arguments, right? And so there is no physical and digital world. They are intertwined in ways that we can't even begin to understand. So we need to move away from those binaries. And I feel like a lot of us already talked about the idea of, the internet, internet inaccessibility or the digital divide in specific countries. And I believe Lina Cuellar talked about how women in Latin America and in Africa and other places around the world are disproportionately affected by this divide. Right. Even though, so I also want to talk about the way that so one thing I want to say is that the internet provides avenues for marginalized people to some extent to organize and build community. So for example, in Ghana, the queer community are able to build community on digital platforms because of the harm or physical attacks that they get, offline. Right, but that does not mean that they don't get cyberbullied or they don't experience queer phobia on these digital spaces. A lot of them have to mask their identities in order to be able to live to some extent a normal life in these digital spaces. So I just want us to think about the way that the internet can be a space for radical organizing, but at the same time can also be a space that reproduces systemic oppressions, especially for marginalized people. But it also holds the potential for us to build communities within these spaces which are safe for us, communities where you can get together and talk about topics that otherwise are considered taboo, not just in the public sphere, but in traditional media. So for example, you're not going to see a news story on Ghana television that says that we need to support gay rights, or that says that gay people deserve their rights and we need to move towards a place where queer people in Ghana can live comfortably without experiencing queerphobia, both in digital spaces and in the physical world. But another thing that I want to say is that it has provided a space for people who have access to it to be able to be heard, right? And I want us to not think about the idea of voice for the voiceless, because everyone has a voice, but let's think about the way that certain voices were not heard. So a good example is what happened in Kenya and what happened in Ghana. So in Ghana, CNN published a story that was inaccurate, and then the hashtag CNN Get It Right was used to get them to fix it. And then in Kenya, when there were, I don't remember the specific issue, but in Kenya, I believe it was the mall attacks. And then the New York Times did not handle the publishing of photos of victims of these attacks well. A lot of Kenyans came out and then tried to hold them accountable. Even if they were not listened to and their demands were not met, the global world heard them and they understood where they were coming from and they saw the injustices that they were experiencing. And so it's a very complex space. It is not perfect. It is not all good or all bad. But when we talk about it, we need to discuss the internet with nuance, think about the way that it can replicate or reproduce inequalities, think about the ways that it can be used to create safe communities for marginalized people, but also think about the ways that marginalized people within these categories of gender, ethnicity, sexuality, disability, who do not have access to these digital spaces, are excluded from the safe spaces that the internet can create for them.
Thank you for that elaborate response. I would like to bring in Edwin, because it's been a while since we heard from you, just to reflect on this inclusion-exclusion, dilemma that we have with the internet. At the same time, you can have avenues of inclusion of people who were, marginalized before, and now they could use the internet and try to, force themselves and it gets to be heard every day. On the other hand, introduction of exclusion. And I wanted you to reflect particularly on the fact that English is the lingua franca of the internet, and how, as a literary activist, how do you reflect on that? How does it marginalize the fact that the very core, the hard body of the internet, it comes in English, and people of different backgrounds, education, language have to contend with that? Please reflect on that, Edwin.
Yeah, I was listening to Wumpini. I was, nodding and thinking, yes, the voices that are not being part of the conversations. Yeah, the fact that English is I am privileged that I do speak English. But looking even in the news, you look at the way the news come in on the internet. Sometimes you will get like something breaking really quickly in English, and then a week later, somebody in the francophone world, on the French-speaking world, because I hate the terms francophone and anglophone and all of those phone. But somebody in the French-speaking part will write about that as if it was news. But so it shows how much it comes in, much later. But when we speak of internet and knowing that it is not, it sometimes replicates the injustices and the inequalities that we have in the real world. Knowing all of that, for me, I really use internet as a tool for documentation. So we have a saying here that, internet n'oublie pas, so internet doesn't forget. So to have that documentation, especially, in the area of feminisms, and even when we speak of feminism, sometimes the name that come again and again are names like, women like Fumilayo Ramson Kuti, Ya Asantewa. But it is difficult sometimes to get names like Marie Curie, or names like even Princess Yenega, or names like Awa Keita. Again, because they are from that other part of the world that did not come from the English-speaking colonies. So getting those names out, it is difficult. You are even dealing with women whose story has been buried. But even at the unbearing level, you have inequalities that are shaping up. And I think since we know all of these stuff, our role, my role in any case, is to, you know, is to document that, so that, you know, since internet does not forget, so that it is there, so that when we speak of maybe African feminists, we can talk about Ya Asantewa in the same way we speak about, you know, Marie Curie. For me, you know, that is important.
Thank you so much. We have like 10 minutes. I would like to bring in Henda at this point to speak to about, yes, we have seen the exclusion, the opportunities, really to reflect at, in terms of organizing. You know, we are here, we are not here by design. You know, it's been the work of different connections and bringing us together, and just to think about that, how has this then helped? Because in terms of like different African feminist movements, every day I'm able to at least log onto the internet and hear at least a story from Kenya. Like today I read about young girls from a high school in Kenya that went and demonstrated against a rape that happened in their school, and their school is denying that the rape happened, and the school and the teachers association is claiming that these girls are lesbians. So, you know, like really deploying homophobia as we know it to deny these kinds of stories. But the story is already out, you know. So these girls, someone captured them on a camera and were able to know their plight. So every day I could see a story from South Sudan, South Africa, Senegal, and I mean, like, this is one of the very millions of stories. But before, we couldn't actually be in touch with these stories and how this is changing. I wanted to know, in terms of Hinda, maybe Tunisia, North Africa, just to give us an idea of how these kinds of movements are shaping in the intercontinental, right? Within the continent. Please give us a reflection on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of organization or solidarity in Tunisia, since first month of the revolution, we started a movement, an Arabic movement called the uprising, the women uprising in the Arab world, and it was very helpful because very fast we realized that young women in the revolution movements in Egypt, in Tunisia, in Lebanon, in other countries, in Syria also, are facing the same problems. So we started to talk about our situation, and our voice gets really bigger. I mean, more visible through social media, of course. And it was the first action we did together. Since then, we didn't stop connecting with each other. But the most important, I think, what we are doing right now is to consolidate the solidarity between women in our country, in Tunisia. The same examples you were saying, Rose, about a little girl in a school somewhere and not known, and who had no connection with civil society or with feminists. It became very easy for us to connect with her through one post on Facebook and one video or a photo, and we do a whole campaign just for her, and to have a real investigation about violence or rape she's facing. Also, and it happened really, and we succeeded to have a successful campaign with the students in Tunis, who were victims of sexual harassment from their professor in university. Also, how our conscious about violence is progressing also with the internet, because if I go back to 2011, 2012, I remember that many activists and many political faces, female faces in Tunisia, were very alone, facing all the violence based on gender. And then through many small groups of reflection, feminist groups of reflection, we started to notice that this violence is very systemic, and it's against, and the aim of this violence is to eliminate all female activism in Tunisia. And then we started to organize ourselves in campaigns, and to start also to report the violence every time we see a post on Facebook that attacking a political or an activist or a woman on Facebook. We start to report it, and we start to also talk about it daily in daily time in Tunisia. I think this kind of solidarity is really the most important thing about feminism. We cannot be feminist, or we cannot progress in our activism as feminists if we are not solidaire, if we are not aware that together we are stronger. And social media, despite all the negative points and all the attacks, or also I have to say also Facebook itself, and it is against feminism, and we saw that Facebook shut down many pages, many feminist pages since 2011 until now. But despite all this, it can be a very useful tool for us, and it can make the solidarity stronger between us.
Thank you, Henda, and for that great reflection. Something going through my head was about early this year, at the beginning of the year, just before the end of 2019, like the last days in Uganda, we had young women coming up, and they were like tired. They used their Twitter to tell who were the rapists in their small circles, and you should have seen, like, everybody was in WhatsApp groups and said, who is next, and it sent shockwaves, because it was the first time young people could go online and say, yes, I know this man, he has raped my friend. I know this man, he is like this and he's like this. It was very shaking, ground shaking. And many young women were threatened to pull down those tweets, but one young woman stuck it out and was sharing stories, Shina, and she's currently, of course, in Uganda, battling cases of defamation. We are seeing these kinds of cases being thrown on young people who are resisting patriarchy and naming that which might not be named in earlier times. For example, calling a man a rapist, it's not we talk about victims of rape, but we never talk about the perpetrators. So we have seen, like, the internet being used to speak out in that radical way. And of course, not forgetting Dr. Stella Nyanzi, who spent 18 months in jail for speaking the truth. And today she has another poem on President Museveni, which I'm yet to read. I look forward to it after this. But she is not, she's unrelenting in her feminism, in her struggle against dictatorship, but also against the social limitations of women and queer people. So we have seen these kinds of both individuals, but also supported by different movements. Whenever I would go to prison and I visit Dr. Stella Nyanzi, there were hundreds of people trying to come and see Dr. Stella Nyanzi. Whoever was jailing her didn't have an idea that people were coming together to say, no, she's a voice that is necessary. So we're also seeing social media also being, like you say, being used to get this kind of community. And the question would be, how do we go forward, because some of these collectives are on and off. Like we come together, there's like someone who has outed a rapist and they are being attacked, so we are here to help. But how do we consistently do this and we don't, you know, in a more sustainable way and not burn out, but also knowing that young feminists who are mostly on where cyber feminism survives is that they don't have the most support, right? Because also like hierarchical age kind of access to funding, who gets the voice still matters, even when we can have a phone and talk. But to be able to systemically really capture all this, you need a certain kind of support. So I would like to pass it on to Wompini and Lina to reflect on that in your different contexts.
Right. So one of the things that we didn't really get to talk about was that even though we,
Sorry,
people,
the sound issue. Can you give it a go?
can you hear me now? Okay, I'll have Lina. Lina can talk, and then I'll get my headphones.
Okay, Lina, you can go now.
Okay, thank you. So I want to resume some of the things that you have mentioned that I think are really important. And one is building new networks through internet, through WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram. And I think, for example, we in Sentido have experienced that. We published 2 years ago a column of a collaborator called I Am Ugly. And it is a very sad story about a woman who feels like really ugly, and society is always remarking how ugly she is, advertising and everything. And a lot of women are, leaving their comments on the text saying, I feel the same as you. And they started in the website to build a community, and they created a WhatsApp group and saying, okay, how are we going to face this? Why do we feel ugly? As our Brazilian singer sang the song saying, I am beautiful. And also, like, this is a struggle. Beauty is also a social struggle, and how people face that. And I think that building new, giving the chance of offering your site, your space, your networks to build new networks, I think it's a huge step on mobilization. The other thing I wanted to mention is polarization, which in Colombia is of a huge importance because, as I mentioned, Colombia is been in our internal conflict since 1946. And in 1916, the president signed a peace accord with the oldest guerrilla in Latin America, which happened to be in Colombia. They signed the peace accord, and the new president right now, he doesn't have much will to validate this accord. So, media is, we as journalists or people who have, big audiences, we have a responsibility on how are we building our audiences against polarization, because polarization is our, is our enemy. I think it's a huge enemy, because people start saying, oh, okay, so women who are saying that these men are rapists, so we all are rapists, so women hate men, so, lesbian hate heterosexual women, so we have to, to be careful with that, and we have to be very conscious that we have to build our audiences consciously on against polarization, because feminism is used by conservative groups, by radical religious groups to polarize and to move people against social movements, human rights social movements.
Thank you, Lena. I would like to bring in Wompini in this case, if you can build on that, but also because you're situated now in United States, touch a little bit, because this has been the biggest movement this year, Black Lives Matter, and why the web and gender matters when you come to the conversation of Black lives. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So before I even touch on that, I just wanted to make another note, which I wish I could have talked about in the beginning of the conversation, where I want to talk about, and I think Lena sort of made me think about this. So the idea of platforms and who has a platform and how large their platform can be and all of that, and how that plays into how much of their voice is amplified or has a larger reach or gets more engagement on these digital platforms. And it's something that I've talked about in some of my work with the idea of, cultural capital and how a person's education, social network, their social media persona, their self-concept, self-presentation sort of equip them with power and elevate them in the digital media hierarchy. So when we talk about access to digital platforms, we also have to think about the cultural capital and how we're positioned within these spaces, and whether that generally determines how many retweets you get, how many likes you get, and all of that. So with the Black Lives Matter movement here in the US, it's really interesting that a lot of the conversations, I mean, it has existed for a long time now. But this year, things finally erupted, especially in the summer this year. Due to a myriad of reasons. Some people have the theory that the reason why things erupted this year was, one, because people were tired, and also because people were generally working from home, and so we had a little more time to go out and engage civically than we would have if we were trapped in this capitalist machine that we exist in. So with the Black Lives Matter movement, there have always been conversations about the ways that marginalized Black people are sort of erased from conversations around whose life matters. So when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, we need to think about how the death or the killing of trans people or trans women in America does not get, or is not as amplified as it should be. The death of Black women, and how we don't hear much of that, right? So when we think about it, we also have to think about what Crenshaw talks about with the idea of intersectionality, and how it sort of shapes your lived reality, and how it intertwines with the system. And you'll see that manifesting in these movements. And ironically, the leaders of the movement are women, but the cases that are often amplified are the cases of Black men. I mean, you can also trace that back to Jim Crow America, and back to the civil rights movement, and the way that Black men were sort of treated within during these periods, right? And so I believe that there have been various conversations currently within the country about what we can do to center the most marginalized people within the Black community, and how we need to dismantle this idea of queerphobia and misogynoir that sort of plagues not just the Black community, but also the country at large. There's still a lot of work to be done, and I am glad to see that there are conversations that are being had about this. But I also wanted to touch on another thing that that was part of the question I wanted to answer before my network was not working. We need to work on community building, especially within the movements that we find ourselves in. And one of the things that Edwig sort of talked about that resonated with me was the idea of language barriers and what that means. And I like that she mentioned Yaninga, because Yaninga is also my ancestor. And so it's really interesting, especially for those of us who live close to the borders between two countries, how the erasure of specific, feminist heroes affects us, and how it makes us think about our own, ancestry and our own lived realities and our own positioning within the national project of Ghana. So it was really interesting that she brought that up, because I was like, yes, I can relate to that. I literally had a conversation about her with my father only last month. So that, and my nephew is called Yemtore, which literally means Yaninga in Dagwanli. So Yaninga is Mosi, which is spoken both in Ghana and Burkina Faso. But also, yeah. And I also want us to talk about the idea of coalition building and how that's important, right? And solidarity. So the Black Lives Matter movement learned a lot from the Palestinian movement about how to deal with, getting pushback from the police and tear gas and all of that. So if our movements have a transnational bend, we are able to learn from each other. We are able to draw from the various strategies that are happening across marginalized communities within the world, and we're able to build stronger movements. So I believe that those things are important, especially within digital feminist organizing.
Thank you so much. Just briefly before I go to Nancy to bring us questions and reflections, when Penny was talking, I was reflecting on these kind of histories that are not confined within colonial borders. They are shared histories. In Uganda, for example, in Rwanda, in Tanzania, northern Tanzania, there's a famous woman, Queen Muhumuza. She's not taught in our history books as someone who was a legend who led a rebellion against three colonizers, the Germans, the Belgians, and the British. She was very a good organizer. So when we kill those stories, then we can't even link to our own heritage of organizing and women organizing and their place in pushing domination of all kinds. In the other words, when Henda was talking about the kind of movements across North Africa and Middle East, I just wanted to share, during the lockdown, we saw a lot of women, thousands of African women are going to the Middle East for work, working under very terrible conditions, migrant women, Black women, and the hegemony and the oppression, the racial oppression that is very present. So I collaborated with a movement in Lebanon, the anti-racist movement in Lebanon, to bring out the stories of women who are stuck at different embassies, people who had no passports because their employers are taking them, in the continued, even though the fight is still marginal, the continued work of activists, feminists in Lebanon and Middle East to really speak out on the kafala system and all racial injustice in their countries. So that for me is a good example of how the internet is enabling us to make connections. Also the women are able to relay their stories from online. That's how even our newspapers in Africa get them. These migrant workers have also WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups where they report. So somehow more and more we are seeing their realities and able to use them even in our parliament, videos being played from online by women saying, we are dying, this is my situation, I'm in Oman, I'm in here. But more and more the need to work across the continent, feminist movements across the continent to really reflect on what are the emerging issues, because migration has been here, but there are new routes, there are new hurdles for people and who are marginalized and wherever you find yourself. So I wanted to reflect on that. Let me lastly say, someone talked about beauty, and it's very important to say that the internet has been used by women to break beauty standards also, as much as it's put yourself on a filter and all these things. But largely women have come out and said, this is me, I'm living my life. And that too is an important part of the movement, and saying, fuck the patriarchy, I am going to live my life like this, I'm going to dress like this. Currently in Egypt, you have women being, jailed for dressing in a certain way, taking a picture by the pyramid, and the whole president is clamping down on a woman for simply taking a picture dressed in a certain way. So we need to realize that the body remains also at the center of our contestation, and how women carry their beauty and how they oppose beauty standards, how they oppose the restricted boundaries of society on the internet. When you go on Instagram, I like to go on Instagram because it gives me a good vibe. At the end of the day, when I'm done fighting with people on Twitter, I go to Instagram and look at cute pictures of people. That is very important, really, really important. I appreciate that, So it's very important for us to reflect on that. So can I go to Nancy to share with us reflections from our listeners, our participants, and any questions? Nancy, you're welcome. Nancy, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you see me? Yes. Okay. Thanks. I kind of gate crashed as the moderator, as you can see. But anyway, I've been making myself useful behind the scenes. So Amina has put in a couple of comments. how the younger generation have more in common than their elders. Social media is globalizing transnational struggles in ways we need to be cautious about and alert to. Read the narrative of Africa conveyed in Black Panther. African diaspora futurism is very interesting and nice to look at, but our visions do not center on saving Oaklands. Keep our stories coming, sisters. She also reminded us that Opal Tometi, one of the 3 founders of Movement for Black Lives, is a Nigerian who was raised in Texas. It's the children of African migrants joining with African Americans. Saru says we should have lists at local markets of abusers and their pictures as well in the communities where the abuser lives. So maybe we're still not going to just be posting things on the internet. I think that's about most of the comments that I can read out. I had a couple of sort of questions. I think the comment first. Everything was brilliant, by the way, sorry. It's been really interesting. We're definitely having this conversation again. So the one of the questions, when she was talking, the point she was making about the internet actually being a reflection of real life, it's not that we shouldn't treat it as a binary. And what I was thinking for women in that sense is, as a new technology, what we're confronting more of is the consequences of what happens when we speak out. And maybe that is the reality of how far people are prepared to go to silence us, to refuse to hear our voice. And the internet is a medium that has shown, maybe we censor ourselves more out of the internet and speak or feel more free, but we can see the backlash of how there's really intense efforts to keep us silent. So we should measure that as something that's not internet specific, exactly as you say, but that's something that's very real, that this is how far patriarchy and capitalism will go towards us. On the questions, on the inequality question, I just wondered if there's, there have been, the internet itself, World Wide Web, is free. There have been debates about data as a public good. It should be provided by the state. And I'm not sure if anybody, and it should be free, it should be a right. I'm not sure if anybody would like to comment on that in terms of responding to bridging the inequalities or in terms of access to the internet. Some questions around data sovereignty as well may come up, but you don't have to answer that. I know it's quite a big one. And the English imperialism is quite an important one, I find. Not only that, because when you try and do searches, you know what you're going to get. So quite often you have to know what you're searching for in order to find it, because otherwise you're going to get, those of us who are Google PhD types, you always know you're going to get something for it's either US, Western Africa basically doesn't exist on search engines, and should we be thinking about building our own search engines that therefore have that are geared towards delivering us the content closer to home. And the library would be quite nice to hear a bit more of, but we only have 7 minutes left. That's my job. Thanks.
Okay, I will try as much as possible to fit on all these responses. When Amina Mama talked about globalizing transnational struggles, what came to mind? Black Panther, of course, but also Black is King, our beloved Beyonce. And we saw definitely a lot of pushback from the continent. And, you know, when you're pushing back against a very big, system, Beyonce is, on top of that, and to be heard is very difficult. But it's good that to see many Africans who are pushing through, many narratives that were saying, this is the problem with this. Even if you're collaborating with people on the continent, this is the problem. This is where things can be better. And I think that we should have a room to critique and continue to shape these struggles together. The other part was on silencing and censorship, and then on libraries. So who wants to go first?
Well, I wanted to go on the first one. I don't know if that's fine. The internet as a public, internet should be free. I I absolutely agree that the internet should be free, but I also believe that we need to expand beyond just free or access to the internet, because when the internet is free, it doesn't necessarily guarantee access, because we need to think about that's just one part of the access of it, right? So we need to think about technological access. Do you have a laptop? Can you afford a phone that can be connected to the internet? We also have to think about technology, like digital literacy, right? You can have a phone, you can have internet access, but are you able to navigate the digital space? Have you learned how to use, all of these platforms that are available to you to be able to find the information that you're looking for? And I also believe that we need to think about how the most marginalized in our communities are affected by this digital divide or the lack of access to the internet. So this past summer, I worked on a series of pieces where I looked at the educational access for various marginalized groups. And one of the groups that I looked at were people with disabilities. And so it's really interesting when we talk about internet accessibility, that we examine whether these people with disabilities who have the laptops or the phones to be able to access the internet, whether they have the software that they need, that will translate, from word to voice, or from, that will translate into the forms that they are able to access. So like blind people and deaf people and all these types of people, how does accessibility look like for all of them? So when we think about internet access and free access to the internet, I absolutely support that, but we need to think about the layers of inaccessibilities and try to address this holistically so that nobody is being left behind.
Thank you so much. Just to bring in a question so that whoever is coming after can take care of it. What do you, this is Valentina Cardosa. What do you think are the spots where internet is not enough to build feminist communities? How do you think we can overcome that? It could be geographical issue, it could be any other issue, but just like it's not enough to build that movement on the internet. How do we go about that? So I'm going to go to Lina.
Sorry, we've got like about 4 minutes left. Please
yes,
answer.
you can use a few.
But please don't rush. Yeah, but please don't rush, because then it's so. It's not by speaking faster that you'll get.
I think I'm gonna skip my turn, because I actually wanted to listen to Edvik on her experience on the library, which I find super interesting, on what Woonpini was mentioning about internet or accessibility. So thank you, Roswell.
Thank you, Lina. I wanted to throw in a reflection when Rosebell, you were speaking about that in December, just before, we entered 2020, and these rapists were being named. And, in Abidjan also the same phenomenon was happening. And when we were talking about, Stella Nyanzi, obviously, I've been to Uganda, so I know of her. And again, it is about all of these divide that, that we are speaking about. And I'm now wondering, how then do we build a community at a continental level? Because, if young feminists in Uganda are naming their rapists, and young feminists in Abidjan are naming their rapists online, and young feminists in Burkina Faso are talking about, vraie femme africaine, like, a real African woman. So a real African woman, by the way, does not give birth via cesarean. She's a strong woman who does not need any epidural. So I'm just wondering now, how do we bring all of these together, so that we have one big, huge voice coming out? Can you imagine if all young feminists from the continent and from South America and all of those places were naming their rapists in that 1 month? I mean, instead of just being, and also what politicians from Cote d'Ivoire, from Burkina Faso, from Ethiopia, from Colombia can maybe learn from Stella Nyanzi? What can we, what can we learn from there, and how can we support Stella Nyanzi so that it is not just a Ugandan matter, so that it's not just a South African matter, so that it's not just, oh, we speak English so that we know, but so that all of these women are, we are speaking. And, because I think sometimes women are always marginalized. And when a woman comes into a power, it is a scary thing. And it is very easy to isolate us. Then we are not being strong. But, can you imagine Stella Nyanzi knew that, there was a huge community behind her and all of these big, sorry. Anyway.
You need to talk about the library. I think people wanted to know.
Oh, well, it is for all of this. I think it is for one of these reasons that I set up the library. I was writing the fictionalized biography of one of the women who marched on Grand Bassam against the colonizer in 1949. That's why it is called 1949. And it is that particular woman. But in 1949, 2,000 women marched on Grand Bassam. And in the popular narrative in Côte d'Ivoire, they say these 2,000 women march to liberate their husbands and their sons from prison. And the men in prison were just 7 men. So it is, it is a fact that, and these women were politicians. They were all politicians, and business women and that sort of thing. And it is a fact that in the history of women, sometimes what we do are not mentioned. Either people try to round the edges to make us, all nice and palatable, or at other times, we are like, mothers and good people. And that's why I set up 1949, and the mission is really simple. It is to unearth and amplify the contribution of African and Black women in order to inspire present and future generations. This is the mission of the library. And it is a physical space. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we have to wrap up. I would just one last person I see. Amina asking, what's the role of digital journals? Wumpin, it's being asked about you. Digital journals.
I believe that they play a very important role in this entire conversation that we've been having, right? And especially for in bridging the digital divide. So when we talk about the digital divide within academia, or even for the public, academic journals tend to be very exclusionary. You need a subscription, you need to pay lots of money. And I believe that Feminist Africa is one of the few feminist journals that is actually open access. And a lot of the times when people come to me and they're like, oh, I'm looking for material on this and I need to write a paper, I just point them there because, they don't need to ask someone in a Western institution to download an article from their, database for them, right? And so we need to find a way to get more open access journals so that knowledge becomes accessible to all and not just those in the ivory tower.
Thank you so much. You've all been incredible. You've enriched me so much.
I just want to say one last thing.
Yes,
like your story, everything was so interested. We didn't even talk about 2020 on the internet. So we need a whole other session on that one, because it was like that's a topic all in its own. But till the next time, go ahead, Rosebell.
Yes, thank you so much. Definitely, we are living through very interesting time, unprecedented times, and the internet is keeping us together. And we wouldn't be here; we would be all holed up in our homes. So we have to recognize that and try to expand that, and really work on making more people have access to these services, have data, be connected. Because I can imagine people who are not connected, how they feel isolated even further. So this year should teach us that the inequalities are going to magnify, and we should work to bridge the existing gaps and dismantle the structures that are not working for us. So thank you everybody from Henda from Tunisia, Lena from Colombia, Edwig from Cote d'Ivoire, Wimpini from Georgia, Ghana. Thank you so much. This has been lovely. I hope to see you sometime when the times are better. But take care of yourselves and keep your masks on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
you.